She doesn't have the strength to fight us anymore, my daughter-in-law whispered to my son as they packed my things. I sat quietly in my chair, pretending to be weak. The next morning, they walked into the living room and froze, because what they saw changed everything. Subscribe to the channel, leave your like and comment from which part of the world you are watching, get comfortable, and relax. Let's begin. She doesn't have the strength to fight us anymore. The words were a soft, smug whisper, but in the quiet of my living room, they cut like glass. Chloe handed my son another flattened cardboard box. The sound of the tape dispenser grinding was loud in the space where family laughter used to live. I sat in my armchair, the one by the window where the afternoon light was warmest. My hands were folded in my lap. I made sure one of them trembled, just a little. A slight, unsteady flutter against the dark fabric of my dress. I saw Michael glance at it, then look away, his jaw tight. He accepted the box from his wife without a word. "The assisted living facility is really quite nice," Chloe said, her voice shifting to a volume meant for me, slow and clear, as if explaining to a child. "It's not a nursing home, Eleanor. It's a community. You'll have activities, meals prepared for you." I kept my gaze on the garden outside the window. The peonies were just starting to think about blooming. My husband Henry had planted those for our 20th anniversary. I said nothing. My silence, I knew, they took for defeat. It was a weapon I had learned to use over 62 years. Michael cleared his throat. "Mom, it's too much house for you now. The stairs, the upkeep, we worry." His words were rehearsed. I heard Chloe's phrasing in them. "This is my home," I said. My voice was thin, wavering. I did not have to pretend much. The hurt made it easy. "I've lived here 40 years. And what a wonderful 40 years they've been," Chloe said, her smile not reaching her eyes. She began wrapping a framed photograph in newspaper. It was a picture of Henry and me on our porch swing, young and smiling. The crinkle of the paper was a violent sound. But times change. We have to be practical. This house is an asset, a valuable one. It could set Michael and me up for our future, your future too, in a safer, easier place. I watched her place the wrapped frame in a box. She did it with care, but it was the care of a mover handling inventory, not a person handling a memory. Each item she packed was a piece of my life, a stitch in the tapestry of this house. The ceramic owl my daughter Sarah made in 3rd grade, the stack of leather-bound book club journals. They disappeared into the cardboard, their histories muffled. "The Paradise Grove facility has a 2-bedroom opening next week," Michael said, avoiding my eyes. He was assembling a box, his movements clumsy. "It's a secured campus. You won't have to worry about anything." I let a long moment of silence stretch. I counted the ticks of the grandfather clock in the hall. 5, 6, 7. "You have already decided," I said, not as a question. Chloe answered. "We have. It's for the best. Really, Eleanor, you'll thank us. You're not getting any younger, and we can't be here every day to check on you. This is a burden you shouldn't have to carry." The word burden hung in the air. I felt it settle on my shoulders, a weight they were placing there. I was the burden. This home, my independence, my history, all of it was an inconvenience to their vision of a streamlined future. I lowered my head. I let my shoulders curve inward, making myself smaller in the big chair. "I see," I whispered. "We'll handle all the packing," Chloe said, her tone brightening now that she sensed capitulation. "We'll hire movers for the big furniture. You won't have to lift a finger. Just think of it as a new chapter. A new chapter. The old one, the one written in mortgage payments and birthday parties and quiet evenings with Henry, was being ripped out and discarded. I looked at my son, my Michael. The boy who used to build forts with these same couch cushions. The man who now could not meet my gaze. There was shame there, buried under layers of stress and his wife's persistent logic. I saw it in the tension around his mouth. It was my only consolation, and it was a cold one. "May I have one thing?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Of course, Mom," Michael said too quickly, eager for any sign of compliance. "One last night. Here. Alone. To say goodbye to the house." I infused the request with a tremor of grief. It was not entirely false. Chloe and Michael exchanged a look, a silent negotiation. Chloe gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. It was a small concession to ease their consciences. "Of course," Michael said again. "We'll finish the preliminary packing today and come back tomorrow morning with the van. We can have breakfast together before we go." "Thank you," I said, sinking back into the chair. I closed my eyes as if overwhelmed. I heard them resume their work. The whisper of tape, the soft thud of objects being boxed, their lowered voices discussing timelines and logistics. I did not sleep. I listened. I memorized the sound of my life being dismantled. The anger was a cold, hard stone in my chest. It had weight. It had density. It was the most solid thing I had felt in months. When they finally left, calling out cheerful, hollow goodbyes, the silence they left behind was different. It was not empty. It was charged. I waited until I heard their car pull away from the curb. Then I stood up. The tremor in my hands was gone. The stoop in my posture straightened. I walked to the window and watched their sedan disappear around the corner. The evening sun cast long shadows across my lawn. I turned and looked at the boxes. They were lined up like ugly brown sentinels against the wall, a monument to betrayal. I did not feel weak. I felt clear. The grief was still there, a sharp ache, but it was now a component of something else, a fuel. I walked to the kitchen, my steps firm on the familiar hardwood. I did not make tea. I went to the small desk in the corner, the one stuffed with recipe cards and old gardening magazines. From the bottom drawer, I pulled out my address book. The leather was worn soft. I flipped past the faded entries, my fingers steady. I picked up the phone, the old corded one mounted on the wall. I dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang twice. B. Johnson. "Beatrice," I said. My voice was my own again, low, steady, certain. "It's Ellie. I need you, and I need you to call Martin Greeley. They're trying to take my house." There was a beat of silence on the other end. Then my friend of 50 years said, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Put the kettle on. We have plans to make." I hung up. I looked at the boxes again. A strange calm settled over me. They thought they were packing my things. They were wrong. They were building the stage. Tomorrow morning they would walk back in, ready for the final act of their little drama. They had no idea I had rewritten the entire play. I had one night. It was all I would need. I went to the cupboard and took out 2 teacups. I would consult with my lawyer in the morning. The kettle whistled as headlights swept across the kitchen window. I turned off the burner. The familiar sound of Beatrice's car door closing, then her quick, firm steps on the front walk, were a balm to the raw silence of the house. I did not go to the door. She let herself in with the key I had given her 40 years ago. She walked into the kitchen, a small, solid woman with a sharp gray bob and eyes that missed nothing. She took one look at my face, then at the boxes visible through the living room archway. Her mouth tightened into a thin line. She dropped her large handbag on a chair with a decisive thump. "Tell me everything," she said. No greeting was necessary. I poured the boiling water into the teapot. "Michael and Chloe were here all afternoon. They are moving me to an assisted living facility called Paradise Grove. The move is scheduled for tomorrow morning. They have been packing my things. Chloe stated I do not have the strength to fight them." Beatrice's eyes flashed. The audacity, the unmitigated gall. She pulled out a kitchen chair and sat, her posture rigid. And Michael? What did Michael say? "He provided reasons. The house is too much. They worry." He repeated Chloe's words. He could not look at me. I carried the teapot to the table and sat across from her. My hands were steady. He's spineless, always has been under pressure from a strong-willed woman, unlike his father. She reached across and covered my hand with hers for a brief second. But you are not spineless, Ellie Beaumont. What is your plan? I asked for one last night here. They granted it. They believe I am defeated. I need to know my legal position. Then I need to demonstrate my social one. A slow smile spread across Beatrice's face. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a retired paralegal seeing a clear path through a legal thicket. Martin Greeley. Good. I called him from the car. He's waiting for your call. He was appalled. Now the house. The house is paid off. The deed is in my name only. Henry and I refinanced years ago to help Michael with his business. When Henry died, I paid off the balance with the life insurance. Michael knows it is in my name. He may have forgotten it is mine alone. He didn't forget. He chose to ignore it because it was inconvenient. Beatrice pulled a small notepad and a pen from her bag. So, no joint ownership, no claim through marriage. They have zero legal standing to force a sale or an eviction. What they are attempting is a wrongful eviction, potentially elder coercion. Martin will confirm, but we can have a cease and desist letter drafted for tomorrow. Now the social piece. You want witnesses. I want a room full of them, I said. When they walk in tomorrow expecting a vacant house ready for the movers, I want them to walk into a gathering. I want our community to see what they are doing. I want Michael to see his mother surrounded by the people who know her, who respect her. I want Chloe to see that I am not an isolated old woman. I am a node in a network. Beatrice was already writing. Pastor Lewis, he owes you for organizing the food drive for 5 years running. Maureen from the library board. You trained her. The entire Thursday book club, but especially Susan Carter. Her son is a reporter for the Gazette. The neighborhood watch committee. Old Mr. Henderson from next door. He's a gossip, but he's loyal. You fixed his wife's cobbler recipe. I listened as she listed names. Each one was a thread in the fabric of my life here. It is short notice. A morning gathering. People will come, Beatrice said with certainty. You have built up a lifetime of social capital, Ellie. People respect you, they like you, and they will be furious on your behalf. We frame it as a spontaneous morning coffee, a come by and see Ellie before her big day sort of thing. The irony will be delicious. I felt the plan crystallizing, hard and clear like ice. It was no longer an emotional reaction. It was a strategy. I will need to make the calls. My voice must be calm, inviting, not distressed. We will make the calls together, after we speak to Martin. She nudged the cordless phone toward me. Do it now, get the legal foundation secure. I dialed Martin Greeley's home number. He answered on the first ring. Ellie, B filled me in. Are you safe? I am safe, Martin, and I am in my home. Good. Tell me the sequence of events. His voice was calm, professional. I relayed the afternoon's events, verbatim where possible. I heard the scratch of a pen on paper. They have no legal basis, he said when I finished. None. The property is yours. You are of sound mind. Their actions constitute harassment and attempted illegal eviction. I can have a cease and desist letter drafted first thing. I can be at your house with it by 9 a.m. Would you like me to pursue a temporary restraining order? I considered it. Not yet. The letter first. Your physical presence will be enough. I want to see their faces when a lawyer hands them a document. Understood. I'll be there. Ellie. I'm sorry about Michael. Thank you, Martin. I will see you tomorrow. I hung up. The legal armor was in place. I looked at Beatrice. Right, she said, opening her notepad to a fresh page. Now for the cavalry. We start with Pastor Lewis. His moral authority is useful. Then Maureen. Then we work down the list. We keep the tone light but concerned. We say you've had some family stress and would love the support of friends over coffee tomorrow morning. We do not mention the moving van. Let that be a surprise. We worked for 2 hours. The tea grew cold in our cups. My voice remained even as I spoke to each person. Pastor, it's Ellie Beaumont. I'm facing a difficult family moment tomorrow morning, and I would value your presence and counsel. Just coffee around 8:30. Yes, Beatrice will be here. Thank you. That means so much. The responses were uniform: immediate concern, instant agreement. No one asked for specifics. They heard the steel under my calm request, and they agreed. By 11 p.m., the list was complete. 20 people would be in my living room by 8:45 the next morning. Beatrice leaned back in her chair, rubbing her eyes. It's set. The stage is yours, Ellie. What is your opening line? I looked toward the living room, at the boxes silhouetted in the dark. I do not think I will need one, I said. I think their own actions will provide the script. I just need to be seated where they can see me, not in my armchair by the window, on the sofa, in the center of the room. The throne, Beatrice said, and her smile returned. You'll wear the blue dress, the one you wore to Sarah's graduation. It commands respect. I nodded. The plan was complete. It was a simple plan. It relied on truth, on law, and on the strength of accumulated relationships. It was not dramatic. It was definitive. Beatrice left just before midnight. The house was quiet again, but the quiet was different. It was the quiet of a battlefield after the preparations are made, before the dawn engagement. I did not go to bed. I went to the hall closet and took out the blue dress. I hung it on my bedroom door. Then I went to the living room and began, one by one, to unpack the boxes. I hung the blue dress on the door and turned to the boxes. The packing paper rustled as I lifted the first object from its cardboard tomb. It was the ceramic owl. I unwrapped it, my fingers tracing the familiar, clumsy glaze of a child's art project. I placed it back on the bookshelf, exactly in its spot. One by one, I retrieved my life from the boxes. The book club journals went back on the writing desk. The photograph of Henry and me was returned to the mantel, the glass wiped clean of fingerprints. I worked methodically, without haste. The physical act of reclaiming each item was a silent vow. By 3 a.m., the living room was restored. The empty boxes, collapsed and stacked by the front door, were the only evidence of the invasion. I slept for 2 hours. When I woke at 5, the sky was still dark. I dressed with care. The blue dress fit as it always had. I arranged my hair, the silver curls coiled neatly. I applied a small amount of lipstick. I looked like myself. The woman in the mirror was not frail. Her eyes were clear and watchful. In the kitchen, I began the preparations. I ground coffee beans. I set out my good china, the set with the pale rose pattern that Henry's mother had given us. I arranged pastries on a 3-tiered stand. I moved through the familiar routines of hosting, each action a stitch, mending the tear they had tried to make in my domestic fabric. Beatrice arrived at 7:30 carrying a bag from the best bakery in town. She assessed me with a critical eye, then nodded once in approval. "You look like the principal of the school," she said, "the one who nobody dares to cross." "That is the intention," I said. We worked in efficient silence, finishing the setup. At 8:15, the first car pulled up outside. It was Pastor Lewis and his wife Deborah. I opened the door before they could knock. "Ellie," Pastor Lewis said, his kind face etched with concern. He took my hands. "Beatrice said you were facing a trial. We came as soon as we could." "Thank you, Pastor. Deborah, please come in." "Coffee is ready." I ushered them inside. My voice was warm, steady. I did not elaborate. By 8:30, the house began to fill. Maureen from the library board arrived, followed by 2 other retired teachers. Mr. Henderson from next door shuffled in, leaning on his cane, his eyes bright with curiosity. Susan Carter from the book club came, and I noted she had a small digital recorder in her purse. The members of the neighborhood watch committee arrived in a group. The low hum of conversation filled the living room, the sound of my community. I moved among them, pouring coffee, offering pastries. I accepted kisses on the cheek and squeezes of my hand. I answered the gentle, probing questions with vague, polite replies. A little family matter, I would say. I so appreciate you all coming on such short notice. My calmness seemed to reassure them, though a puzzled energy thrummed beneath the social chatter. They sensed a purpose to this gathering beyond morning coffee. Beatrice positioned herself near the entrance, a general marshalling her troops. At 8:45, she caught my eye and gave a slight nod. Everyone we had called was present. The room was full. The air was warm with the smell of coffee and perfume. I took my seat, not in my armchair by the window, which sat empty. I sat on the center cushion of the sofa, my back straight. I placed my hands in my lap. I became the focal point of the room. Pastor Lewis settled into the chair opposite me. "Ellie," he said, his voice taking on a pastoral tone meant to draw out confidences. "Your friends are all here. Whatever this difficulty is, you don't have to face it alone. Can you tell us what's happening?" All conversations ceased. Every face turned to me. This was the moment. I had planned my words. "Thank you, Pastor," I began, my voice carrying clearly in the quiet room. "I asked you here this morning because a fundamental wrong is about to occur in this home. My son, Michael, and his wife, Chloe, have decided I am too old and too weak to live in my own house. They spent yesterday packing my belongings into boxes. They have arranged for a moving van to arrive this morning to take me to an assisted living facility. They believe I have no strength to oppose them." A collective intake of breath swept the room. Maureen's hand flew to her mouth. Mr. Henderson muttered, "I knew it. I saw the boxes on the porch last night." Pastor Lewis's expression shifted from concern to stern dismay. "Ellie, that is unconscionable. This is your home. Do they have legal authority?" "They have no legal authority whatsoever," I said. "The house is paid for. The deed is in my name alone. My attorney, Martin Greeley, is on his way here now with the appropriate documents to make that clear to them." Susan Carter leaned forward. "Ellie, did they threaten you? Coerce you?" "They spoke about me as if I were not in the room," I said, the memory lending a frost to my tone. "They discussed my weakness. They outlined their plans for my assets. They treated me as a burden to be removed. I pretended to agree. I asked for one last night in my home. They granted it, believing they had won." A low rumble of anger moved through my friends. "Where is Michael now?" Deborah asked. "He and Chloe will be here shortly," I said. "They expect to find me alone, ready to be led away. They will instead find you, all of you. I want you to be my witnesses. I want them to see that I am not isolated, that this house is not just a property, but a part of a community, that I have strength they never considered." Pastor Lewis stood up. "You have more than our witness, Ellie. You have our support." A murmur of firm agreement followed his words. Beatrice spoke from her post by the window. "Car turning onto the street, it's them, and there's a large van behind them." The room stilled. Every person straightened in their chair or turned to face the doorway. The atmosphere shifted from sympathetic gathering to a quiet, poised tribunal. I remained seated on the sofa. I did not look toward the window. I kept my gaze on the empty hallway that led to the front door. I heard the crunch of gravel as two vehicles pulled into my driveway. Car doors opened and closed. There was the sound of two voices, light and confident, approaching the house. A key turned in the lock. The front door opened. The front door swung open. I heard Chloe's voice first, bright and falsely cheerful, meant for me. "Eleanor, we're here. The van is right outside. We thought we'd get an early Her sentence died in her throat. The click of her heels on the hardwood floor stopped abruptly. I did not turn my head. I kept my gaze forward, watching their reflections distorted in the glass front of my display cabinet. I saw two figures freeze in the hallway archway. The gentle murmur of my living room full of people was the only sound. I slowly turned to face them. Michael stood half a step behind Chloe, a set of moving company paperwork in his hand. His face went through a rapid sequence of expressions: confusion, recognition, dawning horror. Chloe's polished smile had vanished, replaced by a rigid blankness. Her eyes darted from face to familiar face around the room. Pastor Lewis, Maureen, Mr. Henderson, a dozen others. She looked like someone who had opened the door to her own home and found a stranger's life inside. "Mom?" Michael's voice was a strained whisper. What is all this?" "Good morning, Michael. Chloe," I said. My voice was calm, even pleasant. "You're just in time for coffee. We have plenty." Chloe found her voice first. It was higher than usual, tight with confusion and a spark of anger. "Eleanor, what is the meaning of this? Who are all these people?" She took a step into the room, her posture defensive. "We have a very tight schedule with the movers." "The movers will not be needed," I said. I did not stand up. I remained seated on the sofa, the center of the room's attention. "I believe you both have met my friends, my community." Pastor Lewis stood. He was a tall man, and his presence carried a quiet authority. "Michael," he said, his tone grave. "Chloe, perhaps you should come in and sit down. There appears to be a significant misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Chloe choked out a brittle laugh. "There's no misunderstanding. We are helping Eleanor move to a better, safer living situation. This is a private family matter." Her eyes swept the room, a clear dismissal of everyone present. "It stopped being private when you began packing her life into boxes against her will," Maureen said from her armchair. Her tone was the one she used with misbehaving students in the library. Michael flinched. His eyes were locked on me, wide with a kind of panic. "Mom, you agreed. Last night you said—" "I said I wanted one last night in my home," I finished for him. "I did not agree to your plans. I listened to them. There is a difference." I kept my hands folded in my lap. "You spoke about me as if I were furniture. You decided my strength was gone. You were mistaken." The color drained from Michael's face. He looked at the faces surrounding him, faces from his childhood, neighbors who had watched him grow up, his mother's friends who had attended his wedding. He was being judged by a jury of his own history, and he knew it. Chloe, however, doubled down. She crossed her arms. "This is ridiculous. Eleanor, these people have no business here. This is between family. Michael, tell her." But Michael was silent. He was still staring at me, at the woman on the sofa who was not weeping, not trembling, but sitting with a stillness that felt more powerful than any outburst. I broke the stalemate. "Since you are both here, and since my friends have kindly come to offer their support, I would like to make a few things clear." I paused, ensuring I had every person's attention, most especially my son's. "This house is my home. It was purchased by my husband and me 40 years ago. The mortgage was paid in full, by me after his death. The deed is in my name, Eleanor Clarice Beaumont, alone. I have never added another name to it. I have never given anyone permission to sell it or to remove me from it." I saw Chloe's jaw tighten. She had not known about the deed. She had assumed. "Your attempt to relocate me against my will, while I am of sound mind and body, is legally actionable," I continued, my words precise. "It is also morally reprehensible. You assume that because I am older and because I live alone, I was an easy target. You assumed no one would notice or care if I disappeared into a community. You were wrong on all counts." A low murmur of approval rippled through the room. Mr. Henderson nodded vigorously. This is slander," Chloe sputtered, but her confidence was cracking. She turned to Michael, her voice sharp. "Say something. This is your mother." Michael finally moved. He took a step further into the room, his shoulders slumped. "Mom," he said, his voice thick, we were just trying to help. We thought it was too much for you." "You did not ask me," I said. The words were simple and final. "You told me. You and your wife made a decision about my life and presented it as a fait accompli. That is not help. That is a takeover." At that moment, the doorbell rang. The sound was abnormally loud in the tense quiet. Beatrice, who had been watching from the sidelines with a look of deep satisfaction, moved to answer it. She returned with Martin Greeley. He wore a dark suit and carried a leather folio. He looked exactly like what he was, a professional here on business. He gave me a slight, respectful nod. "Ellie." "Thank you for coming, Martin," I said. Chloe's eyes widened at the sight of him. She knew who he was. I had used his services for my will years ago. Martin did not acknowledge Michael or Chloe immediately. He walked to the center of the room near where I sat and opened his folio. He extracted 2 crisp, stapled documents. Only then did he turn to address them. "Michael, Chloe, I am Martin Greeley, Mrs. Beaumont's attorney. On her behalf, and pursuant to the events of yesterday and your presence here this morning with a moving vehicle, I am serving you with this formal cease and desist letter." He held out the documents. Neither of them moved to take them. "The letter outlines the illegal nature of your attempts to evict Mrs. Beaumont from her sole-owned property. It demands you immediately cease all such actions and vacate the premises. Failure to comply will result in the immediate filing for a restraining order and the initiation of civil proceedings for coercion and attempted wrongful eviction." He let the words hang. The only sound was the faint rustle of the paper as he finally placed the documents on the coffee table next to the tiered stand of pastries. The tableau was complete. The shocked son, the furious cornered wife, the ring of silent, stern witnesses, and me, seated calmly in the eye of the storm I had orchestrated. The weakness they had whispered about had been a costume. They were now looking at the real thing. Martin placed the documents on the coffee table. The crisp white paper was an island of formality in the sea of my familiar living room. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. All eyes were on Michael and Chloe, and on me. I watched my son's face. The initial shock was hardening into something else, a dawning, awful comprehension. He was beginning to see the architecture of his mistake, and it was vast. Chloe's expression was different. It was the furious calculation of a gambler who has just realized the game is rigged, and she is holding the losing hand. I decided it was time to build the foundation. The legal document was one pillar. The story was another. I stood up. I did not need to, but standing made a statement. It made me the lecturer at the front of the room, and them the students who had failed the most basic test. "Since we are all here," I said, my voice clear and carrying, "I would like to explain something to my son and his wife, and I would like my friends to hear it, as they are part of this story too." I walked to the mantel. I picked up the photograph of Henry and me on the porch swing. I held it so Michael could see it. "Your father and I bought this house in 1983. The asking price was $85,000. It was a fortune to us. We had saved for 7 years. We put every extra dollar into a coffee can in the cupboard. Henry worked overtime at the plant. I took on extra tutoring jobs after my library shifts. Our down payment was $20,000. It represented years of sacrifice." I replaced the photo and turned to face the room. The mortgage was a source of pride and terror for 30 years. We paid it on the 15th of every month without fail. We painted these walls ourselves. We planted that garden. We raised 2 children here. We hosted church gatherings, birthday parties, and quiet Sunday dinners. This house is not an asset. It is a memoir written in wallpaper and floorboards. Michael's eyes were fixed on the floor. Chloe stared out the window, her arms still tightly crossed. "When Henry died," I continued, the words factual, not emotional, "the life insurance policy was for $50,000. I used it to pay off the remaining balance of the mortgage. I did that the week after his funeral. It felt like the last thing we would do together." The deed arrived in the mail a month later. It has one name on it, mine. I looked directly at Chloe. You saw a house, a piece of equity, a stepping stone. You never saw a home. You never asked about its history. You assumed it was just waiting for you to claim it. Pastor Lewis spoke softly. A home is a sacred trust, Michael. It's the physical evidence of a family's labor and love. You can't pack that into a box. Maureen added, her voice firm. Your mother built a life here, a respected life. She is a pillar of this community. Did you think no one would notice if you tried to remove that pillar? The questions hung in the air, not from me, but from the community. This was the social proof I had gambled on. They were not just witnessing, they were testifying. I walked to the small locked drawer in my writing desk. I took my key ring from my pocket, found the correct key, and opened it. Inside was a slim, important-looking folder. I removed a single sheet of paper. I carried it back and handed it not to Michael, but to Martin Greeley. Martin, would you confirm for everyone present the legal status of the property at 2117 Maple Lane? Martin took the paper. It was the deed. He scanned it, though he knew its contents already. He looked up and addressed the room. This is the official deed for the property. The sole owner of record is Eleanor Clarice Beaumont. There are no liens, no co-owners, no claims of any kind. The property is free and clear. He then looked at Michael and Chloe. Any attempt to force Mrs. Beaumont from this property against her will is a civil offense. The cease and desist letter is the first step. The next step is a restraining order and a lawsuit. I would strongly advise you to take this letter seriously. Chloe finally found her voice again. It was stripped of its polish, sharp and desperate. This is emotional blackmail. Surrounding yourself with people to gang up on your own son? To embarrass him? What kind of mother does that? Her words were a tactical error. I saw it in the immediate shift in the room's energy, a collective stiffening, a sharp intake of breath from Deborah. I did not raise my voice. I am not embarrassing him, Chloe. He embarrassed himself. I am simply refusing to be erased quietly. A good mother teaches her child right from wrong. Sometimes that lesson comes late, and sometimes it has an audience. I turned my attention fully to Michael. You stood in this room yesterday and watched her wrap my memories in newspaper. You heard her say I had no strength, and you said nothing. You brought boxes. That is the truth. These people, I said, gesturing around the room, are here because they know a different truth. They know the woman who organized the fundraiser when the library roof leaked. They know the neighbor who has a spare key to half the houses on this street. They know my strength. You chose to forget it. They did not. Michael raised his head. His eyes were red-rimmed. He looked at the faces of the people who had known him since he was a boy. He looked at Pastor Lewis's disappointment. He looked at Maureen's stern regard. He looked at Mr. Henderson shaking his head slowly. The weight of their collective judgment was a physical thing. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the cease and desist letter on the table, then at the deed in Martin's hand, then finally at me. The last vestiges of his justification crumbled. He didn't see a frail old woman. He saw his mother standing tall in the home she had built, defended by the life she had lived. And he saw himself, small and wrong in the middle of it. He took a step back, bumping into the doorframe. I need air, he mumbled, and turned, stumbling back down the hallway toward the front door. We heard it open and shut. He left Chloe alone in the archway, exposed. The community's gaze, now devoid of any sympathy, settled on her. The foundation was laid. The deed was clear. The story was told. The first of the two had broken. The front door clicked shut behind Michael. The sound seemed to release the tension in the room by a single degree. Chloe remained standing in the archway, isolated. Her face was a mask of fury and humiliation. She looked at the cease and desist letter, at the silent, accusing faces, and finally at me. "This isn't over," she said, her voice low and venomous. She did not wait for a reply. She turned on her heel and stalked back down the hallway. A moment later, we heard her car door slam and an engine rev too loudly as she pulled away. The moving van, I presumed, would follow. A collective exhale seemed to move through my friends. The immediate confrontation was past. Martin Greeley carefully placed the deed back into its folder and handed it to me. "They've been served, Ellie. The ball is in their court now. Call me immediately if they make any further contact beyond retrieving their personal items." "Thank you, Martin. I will." He nodded to the room and took his leave. The social atmosphere began to reassert itself, but it was different now. There was a somber, satisfied energy. People began to speak in low tones, recounting what had just happened. Beatrice started quietly gathering empty cups. I stood still for a moment, listening to the murmur. The strategic part was complete. The legal and social victories were secured, but there was one piece of unfinished business. I looked toward the kitchen. Through the doorway, I could see Michael's silhouette. He was standing at the sink, his head bowed, looking out the window to the backyard. I excused myself from the group and walked into the kitchen. I closed the door halfway, not for complete privacy, but to signal a separate conversation. He did not turn around. "They're gone," I said. He nodded, his back still to me. His shoulders were hunched. "The van left. Chloe drove off. She didn't even look at me." His voice was ragged. I did not offer comfort. I walked to the counter and filled the electric kettle with fresh water. I switched it on. The mundane action felt necessary. "You should sit down," I said. He finally turned. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked 10 years older. He pulled out a chair from the kitchen table and slumped into it. I took 2 mugs from the cupboard. Chamomile for me. The Earl Grey he had always preferred for him. I placed the tea bags in the mugs and waited for the water to boil. "Why did you do it, Michael?" I asked. The question was not an accusation. It was a demand for an accounting. He put his head in his hands. "I don't know. It seemed logical. Chloe kept saying it was the smart move. The house is too big. The equity is just sitting here. We have debts. My business hasn't been good. The market changed. We're behind on a lot of things." The words tumbled out, a confession he had been holding in. "She said it was for your own good, that we were worrying about you all the time, that a nice facility would give you community and take the burden off us. She made it sound so reasonable, so responsible." The kettle clicked off. I poured the boiling water into the mugs. The steam rose in 2 separate columns. "And what did you see when you looked at me?" I asked, carrying the mugs to the table. I sat as in front of him. "Did you see your mother, who taught you to read in this very kitchen? Or did you see a burden and an asset?" He flinched as if I'd struck him. "I saw my mom," he whispered. "But I also saw the solution to a problem. I let the problem get bigger than you." He looked up, his eyes pleading. "I thought it was helping. I really did." "That is the lie you told yourself," I said, taking the seat across from him. I did not touch my tea. "You knew it was wrong. I saw it in your face yesterday. You could not look at me. You were ashamed even as you taped up the boxes. You chose to ignore that shame because acknowledging it would have been difficult. It was easier to follow Chloe's plan than to stand up to her and defend your mother." He had no rebuttal. He stared into his mug, his hands clenched around it. "She can be very persuasive. She has this way of framing things so that any other option seems stupid or sentimental." "And you are not a sentimental man," I stated. "Not anymore. Sentiment would have remembered that this table is where your father helped you with your algebra. Sentiment would have remembered that the scratch on the floor by the refrigerator is from when you tried to ride your tricycle in the house. Sentiment would have protected those memories. You traded sentiment for what you called logic. It was a poor trade." He was crying now, silent tears tracking down his face. He made no effort to wipe them away. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. What I did, it was unforgivable." I considered his words. The apology was real, born of utter defeat and exposure. But it was not enough. "The apology is for you, right now, to ease your guilt," I said. "Forgiveness is for me to decide, and it is not a decision I will make today. An apology does not unpack the boxes. It does not unsay the words. It does not erase the fact that you were willing to discard me." He winced at every sentence. "What can I do?" he asked, helplessly. "You can sit there," I said, "and you can feel the full weight of what you did. You can understand that you betrayed the person who loved you first and longest. You can remember that strength is not always loud. Sometimes it is very, very quiet, and you can live with that knowledge." I took a sip of my tea. It was still too hot. "That is what you can do." We sat in silence for a long time. The muffled sounds of the gathering in the living room were a distant backdrop. The crack in his facade was no longer a crack. It was a chasm, and he was falling through it. I watched him fall. It gave me no pleasure. It was a necessary demolition. Finally, he spoke, his voice hollow. "What happens now?" "Now," I said, "you will take your copy of that letter and you will leave my house. You will deal with the financial consequences of your own choices without using my home as a solution. You are my son. I will always love you, but you are not welcome here if your purpose is to diminish me. The next time you cross that threshold, it will be because you see me for who I am, not for what I own." He nodded slowly, a mechanical movement. He stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. He did not touch his tea. He walked to the kitchen door, then paused. He did not turn around. "I'll go," he said. I listened as he walked through the living room. I heard the murmured goodbyes, stiff and uncomfortable. I heard the front door open and close one more time. I remained at the table. I finished my tea. The warmth of it was the only comfort I would allow myself. The sun's awakening was complete. It was a painful, ugly process, but it was honest, and in that honesty, I could begin to see the faint, distant possibility of a bridge I had no intention of crossing any time soon. I finished my tea at the kitchen table. The muted sounds from the living room were shifting. The gathering was winding down. Through the half-open door, I saw Beatrice shepherding people toward the front hall, accepting thanks and promises to call. The protective circle was dispersing, its work done. I rinsed my mug and placed it in the dishwasher. The ordinary task grounded me. As I wiped my hands on a towel, I heard a new car pull into the driveway. It was not Michael's. The engine was quieter. I walked to the front window and saw Martin Greeley's sedan. He had left earlier, but had evidently waited nearby. This, too, was part of the plan we had discussed on the phone. Beatrice, seeing his car, gave me a knowing look and opened the front door before he could ring. Martin stepped inside, his leather folio once again under his arm. He nodded to the few remaining friends. Pastor Lewis and Maureen were putting on their coats. "Pastor, Maureen," he said politely. "Martin," Pastor Lewis replied. "I trust this is the final act for today?" "A necessary formality," Martin said. His voice was calm, professional. "To ensure clarity." Just as he said this, another vehicle, moving fast, screeched to a halt at the curb. It was Chloe's car. She got out, slamming the door. Her earlier exit had not been final. She'd gone somewhere, perhaps to drive around the block, to fume, to plot, and had decided to return. She marched up the walk, her face set in lines of furious determination. She did not see Michael's car. He had not come back with her. She pushed past Beatrice, who held the door open with an expression of cold courtesy, and strode into the living room. She stopped short when she saw Martin. Her eyes narrowed. "What is he doing back here?" she demanded, pointing at Martin but addressing me. "Completing his professional duties," I said. I remained standing near the kitchen doorway. "You have your copy of the letter, I assume." "I'm not here about the letter," she snapped. Her composure was frayed, her words clipped. "I'm here to talk sense, to you alone." Her gaze swept over Pastor Lewis and Maureen, dismissing them. Anything you have to say to me can be said in front of my attorney and my friends, I replied. They are witnesses to this entire situation. I prefer it that way. Chloe's cheeks flushed. She took a sharp breath, visibly trying to regain control. Fine. This charade has gone on long enough. You've humiliated your son and me in front of half the neighborhood. Are you satisfied? Now can we have an adult conversation about the real issue? Martin stepped forward. Mrs. Beaumont, the real issue, as you put it, has been settled legally. The conversation is over. My client is not moving. The house is not for sale. Your attempts to effect either constitute harassment. Harassment? Chloe's voice rose. We're family. We were trying to take care of her. This is a family discussion, not a courtroom. It became a legal matter the moment you attempted an illegal eviction, Martin said, his tone unchanging. He opened his folio and removed another document. It was identical to the first. I have here a second copy of the cease and desist, which I will now formally serve to you personally, as you left the premises earlier without accepting service. He held it out to her. She stared at it as if it were a live snake. I'm not touching that. Verbal refusal is noted, Martin said. He placed it on the hall table beside her. Consider yourself served. The letter outlines the demanded actions. Cease all efforts to remove Mrs. Beaumont from her property and vacate the premises yourselves. It also outlines the consequences of non-compliance. Which are? Chloe's question was a challenge. Martin met her gaze. If you make any further contact with Mrs. Beaumont beyond what is strictly necessary for retrieving personal items, or if you set foot on this property again without her express written invitation, we will immediately file for a temporary restraining order. Following that, we will initiate civil proceedings against you and Michael for elder coercion and attempted wrongful eviction. The court costs and any awarded damages would be your responsibility. The words were dry, procedural. They hung in the air with more weight than any shouted accusation. Chloe's financial anxieties, which Michael had confessed to, were now being directly targeted. A lawsuit was not a family discussion. It was a financial sinkhole. You can't be serious, she said, but the bravado was leaking away. She looked at me. You would sue your own son? I would protect my home by every legal means available, I said. The choice to provoke a lawsuit would be yours, not mine. The path forward is simple. You stop. You leave. You do not return unless I invite you. You deal with your own financial problems without involving my home. This is your son's inheritance, she burst out. The practical core of her motivation finally laid bare, stripped of its caring facade. It is my home, I corrected her. What I choose to do with it while I am alive or after I am gone is my decision alone. It is not an advance on an inheritance. It is not a bargaining chip for your debts. That thinking is what led you here. Pastor Lewis spoke, his voice heavy with disapproval. Chloe, this is not the way. A home, a family legacy, is not a piggy bank to be broken open in hard times. What you and Michael attempted was a fundamental violation of trust. Chloe ignored him, her focus locked on me and the unyielding reality Martin represented. The legal chessboard was now fully visible to her, and she was in check. Her king, the assumption of my weakness and isolation, was gone. Her queen, Michael's compliance, had fled the board. She had only pawns left, and they were powerless against the rook and bishop of law and community. She looked from Martin's impassive face to mine. She saw no give, no negotiation, no weakness to exploit. The paper armor was real, and it was impenetrable. Her shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in frustrated rage. She snatched the letter from the hall table. Fine, have it your way. Live in this mausoleum with your ghosts. Don't come crying to us when you fall and break a hip because you were too proud to accept help. It was her last petty shot. I did not respond. I simply watched as she turned and walked out, the document crumpling in her fist. Martin waited until the sound of her car faded. "That should conclude it," he said to me. "The paper trail is established. Call me if she returns, or if Michael makes contact in any threatening manner." "Thank you, Martin." He left. Pastor Lewis and Maureen offered a few more words of support, then departed as well. Finally, it was just Beatrice and me in the quiet, sunlit living room. The teacups were empty. The pastries were gone. The legal document on the hall table was the only remnant of the war. Beatrice picked up the empty tray. "Paper armor," she said with a satisfied nod. "Sometimes it's the strongest kind." I looked around my restored living room. The photograph of Henry was back on the mantel. The ceramic owl watched from the shelf. The deed was secure in my desk. The law was on my side. The community had borne witness. The immediate threat was neutralized. The battlefield was silent. But I knew, looking at the crumpled path Chloe had taken out of my house, that the silence was temporary. Some people do not know how to lose gracefully. They only know how to escalate. Beatrice and I cleaned the living room in a comfortable, methodical silence. We washed the good china by hand, dried it, and returned it to the high cupboard. We wiped down the tables. We folded the linen napkins. The ordinary work was a necessary decompression. The house slowly returned to its normal state, the only evidence of the morning's events being the lingering scent of coffee and perfume, and the folded stack of collapsed cardboard boxes by the front door. "I'll take these out to the recycling," Beatrice said, hefting a bundle. "Leave them," I said. "I want them to see them when they come back for their things." Beatrice nodded in understanding, a visible reminder. We were in the kitchen, discussing what to do with the leftover pastries, when the doorbell rang again. It was a harsh, insistent sound. Beatrice and I exchanged a look. It was too soon for Martin to return. It was not Michael's hesitant ring. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. Chloe stood on the porch, alone. Her arms were crossed tightly, her posture rigid. Her face was blotchy, as if she had been crying or shouting or both. I unlocked the door and opened it, but did not step aside to invite her in. "He's gone," she said without preamble, her voice raw. "I am aware Michael left," I replied. "No," she snapped. "Gone. He packed a bag. He said he's going to a hotel. He said he needs to think. He won't answer his phone." Her words tumbled out, fueled by panic and fury. "This is your fault. You turned him against me." I remained in the doorway. "I did not turn him against you. You did that yourself. He finally saw what you were doing." "What I was doing?" Her voice rose. "We were in this together. It was a plan, a financial plan. He agreed to every step. Now he gets to play the remorseful son and leave me to deal with the mess? The debt is still there. The creditors are still calling." So that was it. The practical consequence had arrived, and Michael had withdrawn, leaving her to face it alone. Their alliance had fractured under pressure, exactly as I had hoped it would. "That sounds like a matter between you and your husband," I said, my tone neutral. She took a step closer, her eyes blazing. "You think you've won, don't you? Sitting in your big empty house with all your little trinkets. You've broken your son's marriage. You've broken him, all to prove a point." "The point was not mine to prove," I said. "The point was that this is my home. You attempted to steal it. The consequences of that attempt are yours to bear, not mine. If your marriage cannot survive the exposure of its own foundation, that is not my doing." She let out a strangled, bitter laugh. "Its own foundation? You have no idea. You live in a fantasy world of book clubs and garden parties. The real world has bills. It has failed businesses and maxed out credit cards. This house was a solution, a logical, clean solution. And you, with your sentimental nonsense and your lawyer, you blew it all up." I did not move from the doorway. "It was not your solution to implement. It was not your house to sell. Your logic was greed. Your clean solution was my destruction. I simply refused to be destroyed." "You're a selfish old woman," she shouted, her control finally shattering completely. The polished facade was gone, stripped away to reveal the furious, grasping person beneath. You'd rather sit here and rot alone than help your own family. What good is this house to you? What good are you in it? You're just taking up space, waiting to die. Her words were meant to wound, to shock me into a reaction. I felt them. Like stones thrown against a cliff face, they did not alter the cliff. "Are you finished?" I asked. My calm seemed to infuriate her further. "You ruined everything. He was weak, but he was manageable. Now he's having a crisis of conscience and I'm left with nothing. Do you understand? Nothing." It was the final, unvarnished truth. Michael had been a tool to her, a means to an end. Now the tool was broken, and the end was unreachable. Her anger was not at the moral wrong they had committed, but at its failure. From behind me, I heard Beatrice's voice, cold and clear. "I think you should leave now, Chloe, before you say something that could be used as further evidence of harassment." Chloe's eyes darted past me to Beatrice, who had come to stand in the hall. The presence of a witness seemed to amplify her humiliation. She looked from Beatrice's stern face back to my impassive one. She had come for a confrontation, for a screaming match, for some outlet for her rage. She had found only a wall of silent, unyielding judgment. The fight drained out of her, replaced by exhausted, venomous resentment. "You'll die alone here," she said, her voice dropping to a malevolent whisper. "And I hope he's strong enough by then to do what needs to be done with the place. I really do." She turned and walked quickly down the path to her car. She did not look back. I closed the door. I locked it. I engaged the deadbolt, a solid, final sound. Beatrice let out a long breath. "Well, the mask is off, and it wasn't pretty." "No," I agreed. It was not. I walked back to the kitchen. The unmasking was complete. Chloe had revealed her true self, not a concerned daughter-in-law, but a predatory, desperate person who viewed my son as an instrument and my life as an obstacle. She had been defeated not by my words, but by the reflection of her own nature she saw in Michael's horrified eyes and in the unassailable facts of law and community. The primary antagonist was gone, not with a bang, but with a spiteful whisper. Her defeat was absolute. She had lost the house, her grip on Michael, and her dignity in front of witnesses. There was nothing left for her here. I picked up the dish towel and resumed drying the last saucer. The action was automatic. The climax had passed. The living room was clean. The house was quiet. The victory, while cold, was mine. Beatrice stayed for another hour. We did not discuss Chloe's final outburst in detail. There was no need. The words were now part of the record, another data point in the case against her. We spoke instead of practical matters, changing the locks, which Beatrice insisted on, and a security system, which I declined. The best security, I told her, was a neighborhood full of watchful eyes who now knew the full story. She conceded the point. Finally, she gathered her purse and gave me a long, searching look. "You're all right?" she asked. "I am tired," I said. It was the truth, but I am all right. The house is mine. That is what matters. She hugged me, a quick, firm squeeze, and left. I locked the door behind her. The silence that followed was profound, and for the first time in days, unthreatening. It was my silence, in my house. I walked slowly through the rooms. I touched the back of my armchair. I straightened a cushion on the sofa. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. The afternoon sun was slanting through the west-facing windows, painting long, warm rectangles on the floor. I stood in one of them, feeling the heat on my skin. The doorbell rang again. I was not surprised. I had expected this visit, though I did not know when it would come. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Michael stood on the porch, alone. He looked exhausted. His clothes were rumpled. In his hand he held a single key, the one to my house. I unlocked the door and opened it. I did not speak. He held out the key. "I came to return this," he said, his voice rough. I took it. The metal was warm from his hand. Thank you. Can I come in? He asked. Just for a minute. I considered it. Then I stepped back, granting him entry but leaving the door open, a symbolic gesture. He walked into the living room and stopped, his eyes taking in the restored normality, the empty spot where the boxes had been stacked. I've been at a motel, he said, not looking at me, thinking. Chloe. She came by. She was angry. She said some things. I heard what she said to you. I assumed you would, I said. I remained standing near the doorway. He finally turned to face me. The raw shame from the morning was still there, but it had been joined by a weary resolution. What she said about you dying alone, about me being manageable. He shook his head as if to dislodge the words. It was like hearing someone describe a stranger, a terrible, calculating stranger. And I realized I had married her. I had let that person make decisions about my mother's life. He was not crying now. His emotional reserve seemed spent. He was simply stating facts. I am sorry, Mom, he said. Not the sorry from this morning. That was for getting caught. This is for the thing itself, for not seeing you, for letting her convince me that your life was an inconvenience to mine. There is no excuse. I was weak. I was scared about money. I was tired of her pressure. None of that justifies what I did, or what I almost let happen. I listened. This was the proper apology. It named the wrong, accepted the fault, and did not seek to blame external factors. It was an adult accounting. I accept your apology, I said. The words were formal. They did not mean everything was forgiven. They meant the debt was acknowledged. He nodded, absorbing that. What happens now? He asked, echoing his question from the kitchen. Now, I said, you will deal with the consequences of your choices. You will address your financial situation without using my home as a solution. You will decide what to do about your marriage. Those are your burdens. I will not bear them for you. I know, he said quietly. You are my son, I continued. I will always love you, but trust is not an heirloom passed down automatically. It is built. And what you tried to do shattered the foundation. Rebuilding it will take time. It will take consistent action. It will require you to be a different man than the one who brought those boxes into this house. I understand. You are welcome in this home, I said, defining the new borders clearly. But you are welcome as a guest on my terms. You will call before you visit. You will not arrive with agendas. You will not speak of this house as an asset or a burden. You will treat it and me with the respect we have earned. If you cannot do those things, you will not be welcome. He absorbed each condition. Those are fair terms, he said. They are not terms. They are rules. For my peace of mind and for the preservation of whatever relationship we can have moving forward. Okay, he said. He looked around the living room one more time, his gaze lingering on the photograph of his father. He would have been ashamed of me. Yes, I agreed. He would have been. But he also believed in the capacity for change. I suggest you focus on that. He gave a slow, tired nod. I'll go. I need to find a more permanent place to stay, to figure things out. That sounds like a necessary step. He walked past me to the open door. He paused on the threshold. I'll call, he said. I will be here, I replied. He left, walking slowly to his car. I watched him drive away. Then I closed the door. I engaged the lock. I slid the deadbolt home with a solid, final sound. I walked to the front window and drew the curtains against the setting sun. I was alone. The community had dispersed. The lawyer's work was done. The son had been confronted and had set out on his own path of reckoning. The daughter-in-law was gone, her toxicity expelled. I turned off the lights in the living room one by one. The room settled into a deep, blue twilight. I sat in my armchair, the one by the window. I did not pretend to be weak. I did not need to. I let the stillness of the house wrap around me. It was a quiet I had fought for. It was a quiet I owned. The revenge was complete. It was not a violent reckoning. It was a restoration. I had reclaimed my territory, my narrative, and my dignity. I had forced the truth into the light and let it do its work. The consequences for Michael and Chloe were the natural results of their own actions, not any punishment I had devised. I had merely removed my consent to be their victim. I sat there as the last of the daylight faded. The familiar shapes of my furniture became silhouettes. The clock ticked in the hall. I took a deep, slow breath. It was the first breath I had taken in days that felt entirely my own. The fight was over. The peace, hard-won and fragile, was mine to keep. For now, that was enough. The peace held. The days that followed were quiet. I did not hear from Chloe again. Michael called, as he said he would, 2 days later. He told me he had rented a small apartment. He said he had consulted a financial advisor and a lawyer of his own to begin addressing the debts. He did not mention Chloe, and I did not ask. He said he would like to visit on Sunday afternoon if that was acceptable. I told him it was. The rules were in effect. That Sunday, he arrived with a bag of oranges, a peace offering from the farmer's market. We sat in the kitchen. He did not mention the house or the past. He talked about his new apartment, the noisy neighbors, his plans to look for a different job. The conversation was stilted, careful, like people walking on a floor they suspect might still be fragile. It was a start. He stayed for an hour. When he left, he did not try to hug me. He nodded and said, "Thank you for having me, Mom." It was the correct formulation. I acknowledged it with a nod of my own. The seasons turned. The shock of the confrontation faded into the rhythm of ordinary days. The true measure of victory, I found, was not in the dramatic moments, but in the quiet return to routine. My routine. 3 weeks after the morning with the packed boxes, I was in my garden. It was a bright, cool Saturday. The peonies had bloomed and faded. The summer annuals needed to make their stand. I knelt on the old foam pad, a trowel in my hand, a flat of purple salvia and white alyssum beside me. The soil was dark and rich. I dug small holes, placed the roots, patted the earth firm. The work was methodical and satisfying. My hands were dirty. The sun warmed my back. I heard the side gate click open. I did not need to look up. Only one person came through that gate without knocking. "I brought iced tea," Beatrice announced. She set a tall, condensation-beaded glass on the patio table and pulled over another gardening pad to sit beside me. She watched me work for a few minutes. "Looks good. The purple and white is classic." "It is reliable," I said, placing another salvia. "It returns every year if you treat it right." "Some things do," she agreed. She sipped her tea. "Michael came by my office yesterday." I paused, trowel hovering. I looked at her. "Don't worry," she said. "He was respectful. He asked for a referral to a good divorce attorney. I gave him one. He also asked if I thought you would ever really forgive him." "What did you say?" "I said forgiveness is a process, not a switch, and that he should focus on earning back trust, not demanding forgiveness." She took another drink. "He seemed to accept that. He looks tired, but clearer." I resumed planting. "He is doing the work. That is all I can ask." Chloe filed first, apparently," Beatrice continued. "She's contesting everything, claiming she's entitled to a share of his business assets. It's going to be messy and expensive, but it's his mess to manage." I did not comment. It was, as I had told him, his burden. The fact that he was managing it without involving me was a sign of progress. We worked in silence for a while, Beatrice deadheading the spent peony blooms. The only sounds were the scrape of trowel, the snip of her clippers, the distant chirp of sparrows. "I've been thinking," I said after I finished the row of salvias. I sat back on my heels, wiping my hands on my gardening apron. "About the spare room, the one that used to be Sarah's." "What about it?" Beatrice asked. It gets good light in the afternoon. It is quiet. I was thinking of turning it into a tutoring space for the neighborhood children. I have all those old reading books. I could help with homework after school, a quiet place to study. Beatrice stopped clipping. She looked at me, a slow smile spreading across her face. You're not just going to live here, are you? You're going to plant something new in it. The house is a home. It should be used. It should give back. I have time. I have space. It seems a logical use of both. It's a wonderful idea, she said. I can spread the word at the community center. There are always kids who need a quiet spot and a little help. You'll need a better desk and a bigger bookshelf. I was thinking of using the old dining table. It's solid, and I have bookshelves in the garage. The plan formed as I spoke, practical and clear. It was not a grand gesture. It was a simple redirection of resources, my space, my time, my knowledge, toward a positive end. That's how you do it, Beatrice said softly, more to herself than to me. You don't just defend the soil, you plant something new in it. I stood up, my knees protesting. I brushed the dirt from my pants. I picked up my glass of iced tea and took a long drink. The coolness was sharp and sweet. I looked at my garden, the freshly planted flowers, the established shrubs, the tidy beds. It was a system in balance. It required maintenance, vigilance, and occasional renewal. It's just a thought, I said, for the fall. It's a good thought, Beatrice said. She stood too, groaning slightly. Now I'm starving. Did you make any of those cheese biscuits, or is that too much to hope for? There are some in the tin, I said. Help yourself. I want to finish this section. She went inside. I stayed in the garden. I looked at the house, its windows open to the spring air. It stood solid and familiar. It was no longer a fortress under siege. It was a base of operations. The silence within it was no longer charged with threat, but full of potential. The revenge was complete. It had achieved its purpose, the removal of a threat and the reclamation of autonomy. But I understood now that the story did not end there. Victory was not a destination where you rested. It was a platform from which you chose what to build next. I could have chosen bitterness, to live alone surrounded by the trophies of my defiance. That would have been a kind of victory, but a hollow one. A victory defined only by what it was against. I chose the garden. I chose the spare room. I chose to turn the energy of defense into the energy of growth. Strength, I had learned, was not just the power to say no. It was the capacity after the no has been heard to say yes to something better. I knelt back down and picked up my trowel. There were more flowers to plant. The sun moved across the sky. My hands were deep in my own soil. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.